Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Musical Innertube. I'm Don Rooney.
And I'm John Timpane. You know, Don's had quite a career in radio and television, where he's been an air personality, a news anchor, even a TV weatherman.
And John has been a college professor. He's written several books, and he's been an editor and features writer at the Philadelphia Inquirer newspaper.
We first teamed up for a radio show in college. On one show, we introduced a soothing musical interlude.
But we stumbled, and it came out Musical Innertube.
And that became the name for this here podcast, where we talk with interesting people about their interesting lives. Difference makers who really make a difference.
And today on the program, we have a very, very special set of people that we're talking to. And we're talking baseball, which is something that John and I love to do, and so do these other people. We're talking with Sweeny Murti, who works for WFAN Radio in New York. He also follows the Yankees, and we're also going to talk him up about the Mets. Hi, Sweeny. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing today?
Also here with us today, talking about the Angels and the Dodgers, is Nick Roman. He is the host of All Things Considered on KPCC, and he also has contributed to NPR's Only a Game.
Thanks for inviting me.
And finally, we have Rob Lang. Rob works for WBAL Radio in Baltimore and follows the surprise team, I would say, certainly on the East Coast, of the Orioles. How are you, Rob?
Doing good. Enjoying the ride with the Orioles.
Yeah, it's been quite a ride. Let's start in New York and work our way down. Sweeny, the Yankees and the Mets sort of have everything wrapped up. Are people up in New York looking forward to a Subway Series this year?
Sure, but I'm not sure anybody looks as wrapped up around here. The Mets are on a pretty good streak right now the last couple of weeks. So and they got Jacob deGrom back, so Met fans are feeling pretty good about that. But the Yankees have been on a slide for a good 5-6 weeks now, and that's something that has people a little concerned, shall we say, is a polite way of putting it, about the Yankees and how they're performing. They've had some issues with their starting rotation, which in the last week have swung back in their favor, but the offense has struggled now. Outside of Aaron Judge, there's some injuries to deal with. There's really, it's a top-heavy lineup. It really was a top-heavy lineup for most of the year, but the injuries have certainly cut into that more. So they need to, start really just turning around and playing better over the course of these next 6 weeks or so. They've got a big homestand here that has Toronto and Tampa Bay, two teams that are chasing them but are both double digits out, 10, 11 games out of first place. If the Yankees can hold ground against them, then that would go a long way, I think, in kind of righting them a little bit. And then they have two big games against the Mets. So that's our last look at a potential Subway Series until October if everybody survives the postseason gauntlet.
Nick, out in the West Coast there, the Dodgers are doing well. The Angels are not. You've followed both teams. The Dodgers seem to be on cruise control at this point.
Well, they are on cruise control, and they've been, that way for quite some time. Most everything has been working well, although they expect to get better because there are a number of pitchers that are out. Walker Buehler, Clayton Kershaw, Dustin May, who should be back very soon. A lot of guys down in the bullpen. So they have that to look forward to. And then the trick is to make sure that everybody stays healthy and everyone stays focused. They'll get a nice test at the end of August when they go to New York to play the Mets and square up the Mets, because one of these days those two are going to face each other in the playoffs, and then we'll see how it goes. Your excitement is huge because the team has played so well. But we have had other seasons where the team has played so well and things have not gone well at the end. So that's the worry.
Nick, you know me. I've been an Angels fan since the late 1960s, when we used to be able to get a seat for 50 cents and then move down behind the plate after the sixth inning.
Yeah, I know. I was in the row behind you, John.
Yeah, they used to send the entire staff home to save money after the sixth inning because the Angels weren't going to win anything anyway. But anyway, why, despite the existence of an Ohtani and a Trout and so much talent, why is it every year that it seems like the Angels stink up the place?
The farm system was a disaster and has been a disaster for a good long time. And until they get that squared away, and you would hope that General Manager Perry Manassian is making some steps toward that, it's going to stay that way because there's very little depth. And until this year, you had not seen more than just a ones and twos in the number of team developed players on the Angels. It's changing now. But boy, that disastrous middle part of the season that they've had was stunning. They had played so well and had looked so different for the first 34 or so games of the season, 44 games of the season, and then everything changed. There just isn't enough depth there, and there wasn't enough starting pitching. And until that gets fixed, and they're on a clock too, because Ohtani might just leave town, and Trout is getting older, by the minute.
Which is a problem with all ball players, or the injury that's just around the corner, even if it's minor and keeps them out for 15 days or so. Rob, the big surprise has got to be the Orioles. They're over 500 for the first time in 100 years, it seems.
Well, it seems that way, Don. They're 4 games above 500. They are a game and a half out of the last wild card slot. They had a series in St. Petersburg against the Rays this weekend, where at one point they beat the Rays rather handedly on Friday night, 10-3, and they were actually in that last slot. Now they lost the last 2 games of the weekend. They ran into a couple of roadblocks. On Saturday was Shane McClanahan, their top starter, and they lost that game, unfortunately. And then, of course, yesterday, and it got national attention for a while because he had a perfect game going into the 9th inning, Drew Rasmussen, and the Orioles, thanks to Jorge Mateo, stopped the shutouts. Unfortunately, lost the game. They're now a game and a half out of the wild card spot. But let's think about this. Last year, the Orioles only won 1 game against the Rays. This year, they lost the season series 10 games to 9. Yesterday's game was for the season series, which is an important part because the 1-game playoff is going away for tiebreakers for the wild card. So if our teams are tied, they then go to the different statistics, and the first one they go to is the head-to-head record. Well, Tampa Bay has the advantage over the Orioles in that. But if you look at the broader picture, no one would have expected this a year ago. Yeah. The Orioles have been in rebuild mode, thanks to Mike Elias and to Brandon Hyde, and now you're starting to see some of this, these investments pay off. Adley Rutschman is a great example. He came back. He was called up in May, late May, the same day as the Preakness, and the Orioles have had a winning record since then. They had a winning record in June and July, which it's been years since they've had consecutive months with winning records. They're on their way to a winning record in August, and things are just looking up for this team. Now, whether it means they make the playoffs this year or not, it's debatable. One of the things the Orioles have done is they've continued this rebuild. This weekend, they called up D.L. Hall, who was the 2017 top draft pick for the Orioles, and also the number 1 draft pick. And he also was the top pitching prospect. His debut is going to be a spot start. He's going to be used in the bullpen mainly. He's actually sent back to Norfolk, the AAA team, after Saturday night's game. I mean, he only pitched 3 innings. He gave up 5 runs. He had some good moments, had some bad moments, but needs some more seasoning. But again, this is part of the rebuild. And there were people debating on Twitter and on Sports Talk Radio saying that why did they even call him up when the Orioles are trying to make it into the playoffs? There seems to be a broader, bigger picture view that Mike Elias and Brandon Hyde have over just the day-to-day wins. Still, they would love to make the playoffs.
I just think it's wonderful to see the support that Rutschman has gotten, as your rookie catcher. He was popular almost from the first, and I think he's responded.
Oh, he has, and he's become sort of a team leader as well. Especially among the younger players, and this is largely a young team. The other thing that happened this year, and happened earlier this month at the trade deadline, is the Orioles traded away Trey Mancini,
Yeah.
and he went to the Houston Astros. He didn't want to go. A lot of people, didn't want him to go. He was becoming sort of, he'd been with the team for 10 years. He survived cancer. It's a wonderful story. He got engaged here. He was really ensconced in the community along the lines, and I don't think it's exaggerating to say he was becoming what a younger Cal Ripken was like, or as I was growing up, Brooks Robinson was becoming the leader of the team, and sort of the symbol of the Orioles for Baltimore. And he was traded away. He's going to be missed. But again, that was part of the bigger picture, that you wanted to trade away some of the older players that would become too expensive, and in order to build on the future, and they are building on the future.
Sweeny, you had talked earlier about how far ahead the Yankees are, and when we talk about these league leaders, the Yankees, the Mets, the Dodgers, they're all in ahead in double digits, and it doesn't seem like any of the second place teams, with the possible exception of St. Louis and Milwaukee, are trading back and forth in the NL Central, and the Braves are kind of close to the Mets, but not really. They blew a big weekend series not too long ago against the Mets. So with teams this far ahead, is the wild card working in the sense that there are still cities excited about the playoffs, even though there are so many teams with so many double-digit leads?
It's working very well in that regard. I actually had this conversation probably about 2 months ago with Mike Mussina, Hall of Famer, Yankees and Orioles pitcher.
Sure.
I was trying to talk to him about different factors that brought baseball back after the work stoppage, the strike in 94, 95, because we were coming through a similar type of situation this winter, although it wasn't nearly the same because there weren't games lost. But everybody kind of points to McGuire and Sosa in the home run race. Well, there were other factors, I thought. One of them was Cal Ripken. One of them I thought was the Yankees kind of turning the corner and becoming that dynastic team again. And the other that Mussina and I talked about was about the idea that the wild card really helped interest. You used to have 4 divisions, and if one or two of them was a runaway, it was really hard to generate interest in most of these cities throughout the course of the rest of the summer. Now, then you added you went 6 divisions with 1 wild card, and now you're into multiple wild cards. You've got a lot of teams. If I'm just looking right now, at the moment we're talking, obviously you have 6 playoff teams, and then you have 1, 2, 3, 4 other teams in the American League that are within 5 games of a spot. So that's 11 teams in the American League that can think about postseason. Then in the National League, you have 6, and then you have, I guess you have Milwaukee and San Francisco. The National League is a little bit more jockeying for position because there aren't as many teams that are in the race. That's probably because the Mets and Dodgers, you have 2 teams dominating like that. It's a little bit harder in that division, but yeah. So you have legitimate interest now, though, in over half the league, which in another year might not have been the case. So it's doing what it's designed to do. And I think I'm interested to see how it plays out this year, because there's this extra wrinkle of the bye for the first 2 teams in each league, and how that's going to play out. Does a team push for it? What does the extra rest they get mean for them in terms of lining up playoff rotations, as well as, just kind of the overall vibe of a team? Baseball's an everyday sport. When you get 3 days off, how do they come back after that into a playoff atmosphere? I think it would help the Mets to get that bye, so they can get DeGrom and Scherzer lined up for their first 2 playoff games. And isn't that a daunting task for a team that just gets through the wild card series and maybe has to go tooth and nail for 3 games and then gets to face DeGrom and Scherzer in the first 2 games of the next series? But as we've all watched a lot of baseball. I watched the Phillies team about 10 years ago that had Halladay and Lee and Hamels and couldn't make it out of the first round. I watched Verlander and Scherzer and Verlander and Cole in rotations that didn't win the World Series. So, there was a Tigers team a few years ago that had Verlander, Scherzer, Price, and Porcello. Four past and future Cy Young Award winners, and they didn't make the World Series. Baseball is a funny game, so let's see how it plays out. But to your original point, the wild card is definitely adding some interest before we get there.
I mean, it certainly is in Philadelphia. I mean, they've been packing Citizens Bank Park against lesser teams. They're somehow making it work and getting into the wild card race without some of their best players. I don't know. I mean, I think Harper's supposed to start taking batting practice today. So we'll see. Probably with a very light bat, not to wreck his thumb. But I think in Philly, I think Don would agree. There's a lot of excitement.
Oh, yeah. And I think the same thing in Baltimore. I don't think the Orioles have been this close to a playoff berth in years, in a number of years, and the wild card makes that possible. And I do think that there is excitement, as John said, in Philly. And I know, Rob, I went to Camden Yards not too long ago to see a game between the Orioles and the Angels, and there was a ton of excitement for that team.
Yeah, there's, the ticket sales are above last year. Now, the last time the Orioles were in the wild card was in 2016. There was playoff runs in 2012 and 2014. Those were kind of aberrations because from 97 to 2011, you had 14 straight losing seasons. And the 2012-2014, the team was led by Buck Showalter, who was loved in Baltimore, but then he had a parting of ways. And, now he's back in New York. But people are rediscovering this team. They're just going, hey, it's, we're playing meaningful baseball in August. Hopefully we're playing meaningful baseball in September. I will tell you, during these losing streaks, everyone got excited when the Ravens reported to training camp, and the Ravens are wonderful. We also carry the Ravens. And they got really excited for a preseason football game, preseason NFL game, mostly because the Ravens were winning through this whole period. And, you wanted to see a winning team. And the Orioles, they lost a lot of fans for a whole bunch of reasons. But the biggest part was the team was consistently losing and there was no sign of improvement. Now there are tremendous signs of improvement and fans are coming back.
Yeah, and John will agree with me on this. There were times during the Phillies' lean years, and there were many, when fans would be in the upper deck of Citizens Bank Park singing the Eagles chant, waiting for football to begin. So
yeah.
That's Philly.
I will say one of the things that the Orioles have that the other teams don't, although Citizens Bank Park is a nice park, is we have Camden Yards, which the team is celebrating their 30th anniversary at Camden Yards this year. A couple of weekends ago, they brought back a whole bunch of old Orioles, Mike Mussina and Eddie Murray throughout the first pitch at the game a week ago Saturday, and that game had more than 41,000 fans. I mean, it was a near sellout, second only to opening day. And it's been a while since you've seen that in the middle of the regular season because the team is doing well. And Camden Yards is still, for my money, and I've been to a lot of ballparks, still probably one of the best places to watch a baseball game. I grew up in Baltimore and I remember the old Memorial Stadium well, and I love the old Memorial Stadium. But Camden Yards is very, very special. And, you can go on a Saturday or on a Sunday afternoon, it'll be hot, but you're in the upper deck, you can move up further, to get under cover, get in the shade, and you're watching a game, and it's great. It's great on a summer night. The last few years, I've been a 10-game season ticket holder with a friend of mine, and this friend of mine and I we've known each other since we were kids. Even if the play is bad, we're having a great experience at the ballpark. We're catching up on things, and it's just a great place to watch a baseball game. And we're very lucky to have it. And it is the ballpark that changed baseball. Cleveland built their stadium. The new Pittsburgh stadium was built, modeled after that. You have that view of the river. Citizens Bank Park was built that way.
Hey, Nick, what about excitement in Los Angeles? Does it, the crowds are still coming out. Sometimes looking at the games on television, it seems like the old days when the Dodgers were always winning and they always packed the park. What would you say about excitement about the front-running Dodgers?
The fans are thrilled, and they come out every night, and they're going to lead the National League. Well, they're going to lead baseball, I think, in attendance this year, and they have for a long time. This is the greatest stretch of Dodger baseball in history, at least in the regular season. There's only one World Series in there, but in terms of just consistent play, it's amazing. The ownership that came in toward the tail end of 2012 completely revamped everything that the Dodgers do, and it's a thrill to watch the games. Everything is working. I mean, they draft well, they trade well, they develop their players well. They make smart free agent signings, save for one. But everything else has gone about as great as it can go. And if I could just say something about the playoff system, I think one other thing that baseball wants to avoid is what happened last year when you had the Giants and the Dodgers with well over 100 wins ending up having to face each other in a 5-game season early on in the playoffs. And baseball does not want to see that again. Under this system, that wouldn't happen this year. If they were to face off against each other, it would come later on in the playoffs, and that's another tweak to the system. I think that they want. They want the great teams to be rewarded for being great, and that really didn't happen last year.
Yeah, Sweeny, I wanted to talk too about the way Nick was just talking about how the Dodgers have steadily improved using farm system draft. They use all the tools available. It seems to me like the Yankees have done the same thing in building themselves up, although the Mets seem to have bought their way with the money pockets of the owner, seem to have bought their way into contention. Is that pretty much the feeling up in New York?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the perception because of what they did in this past offseason. But, they still have some pieces here. A lot of, remember they made a trade to get Edwin Diaz.
Yes.
And, he's finally overcome some of the problems he had when he first got here. Jacob deGrom is one of their own products. You have guys like Jeff McNeil who came up through the system. Listen, everybody just wants to win. It doesn't really matter, when somebody points to, oh, well, they bought this or they did this. I mean, that's what everybody does, and even when people, there are Yankee fans who say, oh, but we had homegrown stars. Yeah, but you also had Paul O'Neill and Tino Martinez and David Wells and Roger Clemens and guys who, David Cohn. These guys, you make trades, you sign free agents, and you bring up people. Every team is a combination of those things. What you buy with a bigger payroll is sustainability and not just, small windows. The reason the Dodgers are still in a long window of being competitive and the Yankees are their payrolls. Otherwise, you probably would have been, like the Orioles, where you had a good 3, 4, 5-year run, and then you had to watch it all come back down again before you tried to build it back up. And that's fine. There's no guarantee. Listen, you have 30 teams. Okay. What do you want? Everybody to just win once every year and call that parity? I don't think that's how this works. There's a difference between parity and mediocrity. And I don't think we should confuse the two. Everything, remember the golden days of sports? Well, the golden days of sports, the Packers, the Celtics, and the Yankees won every year, and the Canadiens won every year. That's, this is what everybody else is just along for the ride. So I think, people will look down on a team that spends a lot of money and is always in the mix, but that's just reality. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. The other teams have ability to open certain windows and try to take advantage of that. But that's just the way this works.
Back to baseball in a minute. But first, here's a soothing musical Innertube.
Sweeny Murti's love of baseball began as a player in Little League, and his love for broadcasting began when he began calling football and basketball games for his high school. He worked for radio stations in Philadelphia and New York before landing at WFAN. Sweeny is also a regular contributor to SNY and MLB Network.
Nick Roman has been a fixture in Southern California radio news for more than 30 years. He is KPCC's host of All Things Considered. His love of sports has led him to file numerous stories for NPR's Only a Game. Nick has also worked for the past 25 years teaching broadcast journalism to students at Cal State Long Beach and Cal State Fullerton.
WBAL afternoon early evening anchor and Baltimore area native Robert Lang has been a part of the station for more than 17 years, with more than 35 years in the industry.
And now, back to the musical Innertube.
I'm going to throw this out to all of you then, because Nick had mentioned it earlier about how the Angels farm team has let them down. We've heard a lot about that. John will back me up on this about the Phillies and how their farm team, their organization in bringing players up hasn't really been up to snuff in the last few years. How important is it to bring those new kids up as opposed to going out and buying every free agent in town?
I can start on that. It's vital. You absolutely have to do it. And if you do it, what happens is you get a team that is great year after year after year after year. And you also build sort of like a fan loyalty, a fan base of favorites. The Dodgers have been able to, you look at the drafts over the last, say, 10 years and who they brought up with Walker Buehler and Will Smith, with Gavin Lux, who is now, playing really, really well. That's how you build a fan base. It's how they built the fan base in Los Angeles back in the 60s and in the 70s, and it's how they're doing it now. Plus, it also is just good economics because for the first few years, you have a certain amount of control over how much you pay those players, and you're not paying. You're paying for excellence at a discount as opposed to paying an awful lot of money for pretty good baseball players. Where I think it goes, where it goes wrong is when you have an extended stretch of drafts and of overseas signings from the Caribbean that just go flat, and that's what the Angels have. I mean, compare the Angel drafts and the Dodger drafts over the same general period for the last 10 years, and it's stunning to see how the Angels it's like, can't you find baseball players? They're out there. Apparently other teams are finding them. And some of that has been alleviated in recent years. The other problem is you make a draft, you don't know if it's successful for 5 years.
Right.
By that time, if you blew the draft and then, the group of players that you have is aged out and they're moving on, you're in for a couple of rough seasons.
I have to say I agree with just about everything Nick said. But with one of the things with the drafts and the building on the future is you've got to bring some of these players up just to see what they can do, to show the fans, yes, this is working. It certainly worked with Adley Rutschman. It may not have worked for the Orioles yet with DL Hall, but there was some promise. And there's a lot in the pipeline that really leaves a lot of fans optimistic about the future. Jackson Holliday, the Orioles' top draft pick this year, he predicts he's going to be in the major leagues within 3 years. We'll see, but it's one of those who, there are signs of great optimism and great hope for this team, and that they're building. They will have a successful future year after year after year. The Orioles under Peter Angelos aren't necessarily successful at signing players for a lot of money and keeping them long term. Witness Chris Davis is a good example of that. I mean, we're still paying for him, and he's done. Crush Davis, he had a great season, but injuries and various other things have happened since, and now he's done as a player. And so I think they're trying to build from the bottom up, and a lot of the minor league teams in Orioles have done well over the last few years, and they continue to do well. And now it's starting to show in the big league team, and a lot of fans are optimistic.
Yeah, and then, of course, Sweeny, there's Bobby Bonilla Day for the Mets.
That's right. Chris Davis Day is not like Bobby Bonilla Day, but it's close.
Yeah, it's a wonderful day we all love to celebrate, for those who celebrate.
Yeah, for those who do. Hey, well, let's wrap this up by asking each of you who you think really the surprise teams are. Sweeny had mentioned it earlier, where we've had teams with, and Nick also talked about it with the Dodgers and the Giants last year. We've had 100-win teams that never see the World Series. Certainly, the long stretch of excellence that the Atlanta Braves put together, they only have one World Series win out of all those years. So we'll start with you, Sweeny. Who do you think is the surprise team or the team that we should keep an eye on as we head into the final stretch this year?
Yeah, can I just tell you real quick about the idea that like Yankee fans are so obsessed with winning multiple World Series, and they're pointing to other teams like the Dodgers and what they're doing, but the Dodgers have won one World Series in the last 30-something years, right? You mentioned the Braves. The Yankees have won one in this time, but the Red Sox are in their craw because they've won a bunch in a row, not in a row, but they've won a bunch. So that's probably what's gnawing at them. Surprise team, like it's the Orioles, right? They weren't supposed to be in the race even a month into the season, let alone 4.5 months into the season. So I think that's the surprise team here, that they have a chance to make the playoffs here and that they're showing some promise with some of the young people that you're talking about. There's still, the toughest 6 weeks still to come.
Right.
There's a lot of in-division games coming that are going to separate these guys, but the fact that the Orioles are in this race right now, that they're ahead of the Red Sox, that that the Tigers are so far behind and out of it because they were supposed to be fairly good this year, and the Rangers spent a lot of money and aren't really in the race. It's the Orioles. It's not quite 1989 when they went down the season, because you were fighting for a division then.
Yes, we were. Yes,
not
we
the
were.
third wild card for people who remember that historical season. But it's still. When you're talking about fun baseball, if you can keep playing fun baseball into September and past Labor Day, you've had a really good year, and I think that's what the Orioles are aiming for.
They are. I will have to say, obviously, it begins and ends with the Orioles. There's a lot of people comparing it as well, not only to the 89 season, but the 1982 season, where it went down to the last game again for the division. It was Earl Weaver's last year against the Brewers. And I was a senior in high school back then, so I followed every single game, and it was just literally to the last inning. And I'm also delighted that the Mets are doing so well, especially because they have Buck Showalter. And Buck Showalter was loved here in Baltimore, but man, you watch his post-game press conferences in New York, he looks like he's having fun. He's had the weight of the world lifted off his shoulders. His answers every night are just fun to hear and entertaining.
And Nick, who do you think is somebody to watch, especially out there in the West? All of us here on the East Coast,
Yeah.
The games are played later, and we don't really catch up with them until the next day. But on one hand, it looks like the Giants are fading. On the other hand, they make a big comeback and have a big weekend. And of course the Padres loaded up this year and don't seem to be moving that much forward, or at least not in the early goings here anyway, with all the new players. What do you think out there?
I would watch the Padres. The Padres are an entertaining team, and one thing about the San Diego Padres, now they know they're not getting Tatis back, so that settles things down. That much, and now you can just move ahead with everybody else that they loaded up with Juan Soto and with Manny Machado and with Drury, and it's a pretty strong lineup that they've got there with Josh Bell. And the pitching is, if the pitching can sort of straighten it out, especially the starters, and if Hader, who, had a very bad night the other night, can straighten himself out, they're a great danger in that opening round series. I wouldn't want to play them. Somebody's going to end up playing them. It's not going to be the Dodgers. So I would watch them. And then actually over in the American League, I'm very surprised by the Cleveland Guardians. I didn't think they were going to be this good, and they're very, very good. Everybody was talking about the White Sox or talking about the Twins, but the Guardians have played quite well, and they have a lot of talent on that team. They'll be a handful in an opening series and in a best of five. So, the playoffs are going to be tons of fun. You have a lot of really great teams. at least two of those great teams are not going to go very far, and their fans will be furious, and we'll all have a great time watching it.
Exactly.
Nick, I have to say, the Tatis news sort of went off like a bomb. I understand that taking certain PEDs can help you heal more quickly. And so that's part of this. I think, anybody sitting around waiting to come back after a whole bunch of time, that might have played a role. But it's simply, you have to look at that and go, what is he thinking?
A lot of the Padre players were certainly thinking that. I mean, those were the quotes that showed up in The Athletic over the weekend. Talking about at some point he's got to learn how to be more mature. Fernando Tatis Jr. is about 2 months younger than Juan Soto. And Juan Soto carries himself like he's 10 years older. So at some point, you have to look at a ball player and say he either is or he isn't. And for the longest time, we've all thought that that Tatis was, this transcendent player for the Padres. If he's not, then at least and you can move forward. I would think in some ways maybe like the Orioles did with Manny Machado. At some point, you just move on and you do something else. And I think, the Padres have shown that they're plenty smart. They know how to draft players. I mean, the reason they get all these guys is because they have a farm system and talent that they can trade away. And so they'll keep doing that. And they know that they got to get better than the Dodgers. And then the other thing is they just have a beautiful ballpark too, and a lot of fans that show up, and they love the Padres. It's great fun to go down there in San Diego and watch that team play. So, although the Tatis news was a shock, I think for the players, it was like, okay, all right, well, now we know. Now let's just move ahead and do what we have to do.
Some great ideas in here, some great baseball talk, and some teams to watch. We thank very much Sweeny Murti of WFAN Radio in New York, and Nick Roman of KPCC in Los Angeles, and Rob Lang of WBAL in Baltimore. Thanks, guys, for being here and talking baseball. And by the end of October, we'll know who was right and who was wrong.
My pleasure, Don and John.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks as always.
You guys are brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Musical Innertube.
Check out our website at musicalinnertube.com, where you'll find all our episodes, profiles of our guests, and lots of extras. You'll even be able to leave us a voicemail.
Our email address is musicalinnertube@gmail.com. On Twitter, our handle is MInnertube. Capitalize the M and I.
The Innertube is available on Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud, and iHeartRadio podcasts. Like us and give us a good review on any of those platforms.
And as always, thanks to virtual band Car Radio Dog for our theme music.